Taping. This is the Third Circuit Court Non-Incumbent Candidate Forum. Hello and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Wayne County's Candidate Forum for Non-Incumbent Judge of the Third Circuit Court. This court covers all of Wayne County. Today is Thursday, October 4th, and we are taping this forum at the Henry Ford College in Dearborn. My name is Rhonda Craig, President of the Detroit League of Women Voters, and it is my pleasure to serve as moderator of the candidate forum this evening. Before introducing the candidates, I'd like to thank all of you who helped to make this program possible. Candidates who run for office, league members who volunteer, each voter who takes time to learn about the candidates before voting. You all have done a wonderful job. The League never tells you who to vote for, only to learn about the candidates and to vote. An informed electorate is vital to a representative democracy. We want to give a special thank you to Henry Ford College in Dearborn for hosting this important public service, and to our co-sponsor, the Michigan Democracy Institute Consortium, promoting democracy through the development of civility, literate, and participatory youth. You may access this program on YouTube or by looking for a link at your local League of Women Voters website or Facebook page. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 to help new voters learn how to use their vote wisely and effectively. Today's League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization open to both men and women aged 16 and older who want to encourage informed and active participation in government. How many of you know about the League of Women Voters online voter guide, or Vote 411? Okay, very good. Go to vote411.org, input your voting address, and only your races and ballots proposals appear. You can also learn where your polling place is and whether or not you're a registered voter according to the Michigan Secretary of State. Knowing what's going to be on your ballot before you go to the polls will make you a wiser voter. The general election on November 6th will include many important races and ballots. Please note that this general election will not offer voters an opportunity to vote a straight party ticket. Voters will need to review the entire ballot, both sides, to make their choices in every race. The League of Women Voters urges you to prepare for this election. Go online to vote411.org to see all the races and issues that will be on your ballot ahead of Election Day. In Michigan, we elect our judges who make vital decisions which affect people's lives. There are a lot of judicial races on your ballot: the Michigan Supreme Court, 2 Court of Appeals races, 3 Wayne County Circuit Court races, 2 Wayne County Probate Court races, and your local district court. All these races are important. However, only one Wayne County-wide judicial race offers voters choices: the non-incumbent 6-year term for Third Circuit Court judge. 6 candidates are running for 3 seats on the bench. You have an opportunity to learn more about the 6 candidates tonight so that you can make an informed decision. That is why we are holding this forum. Index cards have been made available to those in attendance, and volunteers will be collecting them. They are screened by an experienced team of League of Women Voters members to prevent duplication. This also will prevent personal attacks and will eliminate questions that only address one candidate. Time will not allow for all the questions to be asked. 6 candidates are running to fill 3 positions for a 6-year term as judge on the Third Circuit Court. Their names in alphabetical order are John C. Cahalan, Tracy E. Green, Bridget Mary Hathaway, Delicia Coleman Morrison, Suzette Samuels, and Regina Thompson. The candidates have been asked to make a 1-minute opening statement. They have drawn lots, and the order in which they speak will be in accordance with the lots that they drew. Okay, we'll start our opening statements, and the first person is Ms. Tracy Green.
Good evening, and thank you, League of Women Voters, and to all of you for coming this evening to learn more about this race. My name is Tracy Green, and I'm a candidate for Third Circuit Court Judge. I've been practicing law for 21 years, primarily in the Third Circuit Court, where I've been protecting the rights of the accused in felony matters, advocating for the best interests of children in contested custody matters, and I've been zealously defending family unity and promoting family reunification in child protection matters. I've been awarded by the Michigan Supreme Court for my work in child protection. I train other attorneys and child welfare professionals across the country in child protection, and I'm twice published in that area. All of that work is governed by the Third Circuit Court. I would very much like for you to consider me for your next judge in the Third Circuit Court. I believe that my experience and my promotion of fairness, dignity, and respect.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Ms. Hathaway.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bridget Mary Hathaway, and I'm running for Wayne County Circuit Court Judge. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight, and thank you to you all for coming to learn more about the candidates in the Wayne County Circuit Court race. I grew up on the east side of Wayne County in Grosse Pointe, which is where I live right now with my very lively chocolate lab. I graduated from the University of Michigan School of Public Policy and then Wayne State University Law School. I have spent my career litigating a broad range of civil and criminal cases in Wayne County Circuit Court, and I see the impact that the law has on our community every day. It is critical that we elect judges who are going to be fair and impartial and impart equal justice for all citizens. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Samuels.
Good evening, everyone. This is like a giant jury trial. My name is Suzette Samuels. I was born and raised in Southwest Detroit. I'm a proud graduate of Detroit Public Schools. I've been an attorney for 24 years, and in the beginning of my career, I practiced in a small neighborhood firm doing family law, elder law, and personal injury. For the last 20 years, nearly 20 years, I have served you as an assistant Wayne County prosecutor. I've focused on child abuse, elder abuse, and homicide cases. About 10 years ago, I helped form the county's first sexual assault unit, and I led and ran that unit for the next 6 years after that. This is a natural transition for me, and I ask that you allow me to continue to serve you as your next Wayne County Circuit Court Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I am Delisha Coleman Morrison, Delisha Coleman Morrison, Delisha Coleman Morrison. And I say that because actually we need you to remember our names, and if I say it 3 times, you're likely to recall one of those names. I'm running for Wayne County Third Circuit Court Judge because I've been practicing actually lead attorney in jury trials for over 22 years in that court. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, and I'm a mentor. I'm an attorney that has practiced as an assistant city attorney, so I've done prosecutorial work, actually holding trials, motions, all of those, and criminal defense. And so I bring to the bench both aspects, because we need diversity, we need people that understand what's going on in the community. I'm fighting for experience, integrity, and the community. I'm committed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. My name is Regina Thomas, and I'm asking for the privilege to serve you as one of your next Wayne County Circuit Court judges. I'm a graduate of Tennessee State University, and I received my law degree from Vanderbilt School of Law. I've been an attorney for 22 years. I currently serve as the director of a civil legal services hotline that provides free legal assistance to under-resourced people in 46 counties, including Wayne County. My prior experience includes serving as the chief counsel of the Juvenile Law Group for Legal Aid and Defender Association, working as an assistant attorney general for the state of Michigan, and also serving as an assistant prosecuting attorney for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I've spent my career representing children, protecting victims of violent crimes, and providing legal resources to move families from crisis to self-sufficiency. I'm hoping that you'll remember my name on November 6th, and that is Regina Thomas.
Thank you. Ms. McCahalan, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and everyone for being here tonight. My name is John C. Cahalan, as it will appear on the ballot. Some background on me: I was born in Detroit, graduated from University of Detroit High School, went to Marquette University where I received a bachelor's degree in political science, graduated from University of Detroit School of Law, worked at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, worked in a general practice law firm doing criminal defense and felony or family law cases and business litigation and counseling. I also worked for a plaintiff's personal injury law firm doing medical malpractice, elder abuse, and dog bites and things like that, negligence cases. For the last several years, I've worked at the law firm of Plunkett Cooney doing trial work as litigation, and I believe now it's important to elect judges to the bench with the right temperament, the right disposition, the right personality, folks that have a love for people and an understanding of people. And John C. Cahalan.
Okay, we will now begin the questions. Each of the candidates will be given 1 minute to answer each question in this portion of the program. As I said before, we began with, they drew lots for who goes first, second, and third. And since Ms. Green went first with her opening statement, the person who will receive the first question will be Ms. Hathaway. Ms. Hathaway, okay. As a prospective judge, what do you consider your greatest strengths and your weaknesses?
One of my greatest strengths which I would bring to the bench is the diversity of my experience as a litigator for some of the region's most successful companies and individual. I've litigated complex multi-million-dollar business disputes and have been recognized by my peers as a rising star in business litigation. As a city prosecutor, I've prosecuted cases that affected the quality of life for individuals and businesses in our community. And as a criminal defense attorney, I've defended the accused in misdemeanor and felony cases in courts throughout Wayne County. That diversity of experience will provide me with a unique perspective that would serve me well as a judge.
Thank you. Ms. Samuels?
My greatest strength is that I have practiced in court nearly every day for the last 20 years, and a judge needs to know more than the law. The judge needs to be connected to the communities in which he serves and understand the people of the communities in which he serves. I know the needs of this county with the judges that we have. I can bring the right temperament, and there's something that I have that they don't teach you in law school, and that's I have heart, and I care about what I do, and I have a proven track record of working for the people of this county for the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison?
As with Suzette, one of my greatest strengths is experience, but also integrity and commitment to the community. I have 22 years of actual litigation. That means going to trial. Over 150 trials, closer to 200 if you include family, civil, and juvenile. So these seats are going to, 2 seats are going to criminal and 1 is to family. I have practice in that court. I see the issues in that court. I live in the community that I live in. I've been a mentor. My husband and I have been a mentor. We understand the issues that are coming before this court. And in regards to restorative justice, how important judges are that need to be equal and fair and understand the impact of their decisions to the community. Delisha Coleman Morrison. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Yes. With regard to my strengths, I would say that my experience is one of my strengths. I also have exhibited an ability to listen to others. Throughout my career, I've also had an opportunity to hold some management positions, and that has given me the opportunity to learn how to supervise staff and to manage people efficiently and effectively. I believe that those experiences would allow me to manage a courtroom and to be able to make decisions without delay, and to ensure that that I am handling courtrooms in an appropriate manner. With regard to strengths, with regard to weaknesses, sometimes I think that I have a big heart, but that may also be a strength as well. So I know that some of the cases that will come before the court can be heart-wrenching, and as I said, I do have a big heart, but I do believe that I would be able to make decisions without delay. So I consider that to be both a weakness and a strength.
Thank you. Mr. Cahalan.
Yes, I believe one of my strengths is the diversity of my practice. Since I've been practicing, I practiced in all the courts, or in all the divisions of the courts that we are running for. I practice family, I practice criminal defense, I practice prosecution, I've practiced civil on both sides of the spectrum. I've been active in the community through several community organizations doing pro bono legal work, representing those that are unable to afford legal counsel, whether that be criminal defense matters or child custody issues as well. And I'm active in the community through Focus Hope and reach out programs that explain individuals' rights when they are faced with difficult situations as being in the courts. I believe, similar to Ms. Thomas, is that compassion is something that I have, and that can be seen as a weakness or a strength. And I believe that as a judge, our job is to help people, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
I believe that my experience, not only professionally, but life experience, are both my greatest assets that I would bring to the bench. The professional experience is probably self-explanatory, but my life experience, being that I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother, that I take care of my elderly parents, and that I've been a lifelong citizen of Wayne County, and I understand the challenges that confront people in this county, makes my ability to judge fairly and competently even greater. As far as a weakness, I too believe in people. I believe that people should have second chances, and I know, however, that particularly with criminal law, there needs to be fair sentencing. So that would be something that I would have to be aware of when I am executing sentencing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For this next question, we will begin with Ms. Samuels, and that question is, what criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of the standard ranges?
In Michigan, sentencing guidelines are no longer mandatory. They're advisory for the judges. So now, more than any other time in the past, judges have a tremendous amount of discretion in sentencing. And a judge can consider any factor that's relevant. You need to take into consideration the victim's point of view, the background of the defendant, the potential harm to the community, the safety of the community, balancing the crime versus the alternatives. I am very big on alternative sentencing. I have a lot of experience, 20 years of experience, and I know that there's a lot of alternative sentencing that can be used, but anything that is relevant goes into sentencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Delisha Coleman Morrison. One of the reasons why I'm running for judge is because I see the impact of judges that don't understand the community, that don't actually know the law because they practice in some other area primarily. And one of the things that I feel is most important in making a determination in sentencing outside, above, or below, because it is discretionary, is the age of the defendant, the crime, the impact to the community, and if there are other issues. Because it's a problem that many of the judges today rely on just the prosecutor, because they're in that courtroom, to make a determination on what is appropriate sentencing if they don't know. And I say you've got to look at if there's mental health issues, if there's drug abuse, or if it's just plain poverty. One of the biggest crimes in Third Circuit Court is poverty. And it's not a crime, but that's the way it's being treated. And we need to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I would look at all factors, as the other attorneys here have already indicated. I would look at the crime. I would look at the relationship between the victim and the defendant. I would also look at the background of the victim, of the defendant, and always keeping in mind public safety. One of the things that judges will have the benefit of is receiving a pre-sentence report from the probation department, and they will go through and look at a number of factors with regard to the defendant, whether or not they've had previous convictions before, what their educational level is, whether or not they have any involvement with substance abuse. But I would also request and like to depend on sentencing memorandums from attorneys that represent the defendants, because that is an opportunity for the defendant to also have to speak to the court and to provide an alternative perspective about who they are. And so I would look at all of those factors in determining what kind of sentence I would provide, and to determine whether or not I would go outside of what are the advisory guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes. First off, I would look at the defendant as a human being and treat that person with the utmost respect. I would use the person's background to consider sentencing, their support system, whether they have family members or friends in the courtroom with them on their sentencing, showing them the background that they come from, where they grew up, whether they are drug or alcohol addicted, or whether they have mental health problems that the courts could utilize the drug and sobriety court system to address their problems and alternative sentencing. And I believe if warranted, folks deserve a second chance and don't need to be put in the system if not necessarily, or if it's not absolutely necessary to the community, which sometimes it is. So.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Green?
Sentencing guidelines are advisory, but they were developed with the consideration of a number of factors that are commonly associated with criminal felony cases. So I would start with the guidelines. I would first determine what those guidelines are, and then determine whether I'm going to deviate from them based on a lot of the factors that have already been mentioned. But one factor that hasn't been mentioned that I think is really important is the amount of support that a defendant has in the community. What kind of relationship does the defendant have with family, with employment, with neighbors? How can we get these people involved in helping to rehabilitate the defendant? And I would ask as well, what is the impact on the victim? And look very closely and weigh those two factors in determining whether I would deviate from the guidelines.
Thank you. Ms. Hathaway?
In determining whether I would go beyond the advisory guidelines in imposing a sentence, I would consider many of the factors that my fellow candidates have mentioned: the severity of the crime, the defendant's background, the injury to the victim, and particularly with respect to the victim's age, whether they're a senior, whether they're disabled, and if that were the case, that would be an aggravating factor because our justice system is supposed to protect the most vulnerable populations, such as those people.
Thank you. Okay, this next question is a compound question, and I'll repeat it if necessary when each of you answer, when it's your turn to answer. Do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this? What are the pros and cons of using driver's license registration as a source of jurors? Ms. Morrison.
Thank you. Delisha Coleman Morrison. The composition, I believe, of jurors, does it adequately reflect the society at large? Yes. The jury panels do represent the communities. They pull in Michigan, in Wayne County, they pull from all of the jurisdictions. Now, do I believe that the juries necessarily are jury of the peers of the defendants? No, they're not. And for me, I would prefer that jurors come from panels from that specific location. I think that is more fair and more reasonable for defendants because those are their peers. In regards to pros and cons of
Using the driver's license.
using the driver's license to pick jurors, again, if you do it in regards to crimes that are committed in certain areas, then yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Thomas.
Yes. I do not believe that the jury composition adequately reflects our community. While we do pull from all of the communities, not everyone from every community shows up to serve in the jury pool. And so that reduces the ability to have actual diversity on juries as they are chosen. And so that's the reason why I believe that it does not adequately reflect the communities that we're serving. In terms of the pros and cons with regard to using driver's license registration, not everyone drives. So I would also have to think that we would not only be looking at driver's license registration, but also be looking at people who have state IDs, so that we would utilize that, we would pull them into the jury pool. What can we do to improve the lack of diversity? I think we have to continue to talk to people about what is their civic duty and impress upon them that they need to show up when they get those cards in the mail, because not everybody does.
Okay. Mr. Cahalan.
I would say yes and no as far as does the jury pool adequately represent the community at large, because while it goes out to a lot of people, it depends on who shows up. So one day you could find a jury that you would believe adequately represents the community, another day maybe not so much. So I think it's a matter of who shows up on that day. And I believe there are certainly a number of ways that could better pull jurors into the system than a driver's license. Like Ms. Thomas mentioned, a lot of folks don't have driver's license. So things like voter registration, state IDs, and maybe increasing the pay for jurors' day's work. While we can't control that, but that might be an idea to get people to come into and serve as jurors for the day and do their civic duty.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
In the aggregate, I don't believe that the jury reflects the society, the community. But I had a jury trial very recently, 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact. And on that jury, I believe that it did. I think that there are a number of factors that weigh in on whether the jury in a particular case does reflect the community. And one of those factors is how zealously the defense counsel, and in some respects the prosecutor, voir dires or questions the jurors to determine whether they will remain on the jury. What I discovered is that many people don't want to be on the jury. So they come up with excuses, and it's pretty obvious when they do. As far as the driver's license being the way of determining whether someone should be on the jury, I think we should not use driver's licenses. In Detroit, people don't use their driver's license because they're registered in
Thank you
other
very
cities.
much, Ms. Green. Ms. Hathaway.
I think on the whole, the juries do not adequately represent the composition of our communities, and I think using driver's license registration as a tool for determining who's going to be in a jury is not a good way to do that, because you're cutting out an entire segment of the community that doesn't drive. I think that one way to improve diversity on the juries is what the Chief Judge of the court is doing right now, Chief Judge Colombo, which is trying to enforce, bring the jurors who didn't show up to court to show cause why they shouldn't be held in contempt for not showing up for their jury summons. So I think if more people know how important it is to appear for your jury duty, more people will show up.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Samuel.
Yes, as a candidate who does jury trials all the time routinely, and I've probably done at least 6 this year, when the jury pools come in, they come in from all over the county, and you can't look at the jurors and tell whether they adequately represent the community or if they're right for that case. That's what the process of voir dire is. That's the term for questioning the jury. And this is why you need a good experienced judge, because some of the judges do not allow you to voir dire or question the potential jurors before a case, and that is critical. So you can, with time and patience of the lawyers and the judge, come to a fair jury. I don't think the driver's license is the best solution because there are a lot of people who can simply not afford a car or driver's license, but they still should be able to participate in jury service. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will first go to Ms. Thomas. And that question is, what can be done to make sure victims of sexual abuse are not treated as criminals, but as victims?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is we have to believe them when they come forward. And we have to give voice to what they've said has gone on in their lives or what has occurred to them. I think that we have to do a better job of protecting their identities. One of the things that we do in terms of publicizing sex crimes, for the most part, victims' names are kept secret and they're not listed in the media. But as a part of the trial, the other thing that we want to make sure that we aren't doing is that we don't want to put them on trial. So not putting them on trial and their previous acts and blaming them for what has occurred to them. So we have to work on protecting them and giving voice to what they've said has occurred and believing them first and foremost.
Thank you. Mr. Cahalan.
I believe that this is a very important issue in today's society, as we all know from the news that's been going on the last few weeks. And I would agree with Ms. Thomas in that, in the first place, we should believe the individual that comes forward and is willing to come forward on such a difficult issue. And sometimes it may have been a long time ago, but they've been scared to come forward. And they encourage folks to come forward if they have been victims of sexual assault, and put things in place that protect that victim so their identity is kept hidden and kept away from the public, and that if they are on trial, they are not seen as the defendant and attacked in a way like you've seen in the news recently of somebody being attacked for coming forward as a victim of sexual assault. So I think that needs to be protected, and I think that's a very important question and a very important issue.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
Well, recently, because of the Me Too movement and the events that we've been seeing in the news, we've all come to understand that sexual assault is a lot more prevalent than we may have ever known. There are so many women, and men as well, who have been victims of sexual assault, victims of sexual crime, and they don't come forward because they do not want to be humiliated, and they're afraid that their humiliation will be for naught because the defendant will not be sentenced or convicted and then sentenced fairly. I think one of the things that can encourage them to come forward to begin with is if they can be assured that they will have a very zealous advocate, not necessarily an attorney, but someone who is trained, who will be their hand holder, if you will, someone who understands all of the aspects of psychological trauma that is associated with sexual abuse, who could be with them.
Thank you. Ms. Hathaway.
I think it's important that a judge creates a courtroom that is comfortable for victims of sexual assault to come in and testify, and that a judge controls the proceedings very carefully in those types of cases and makes sure that the victim gets the type of respect that they deserve, particularly when under a cross-examination from the prosecutor.
Okay, thank you.
This happens to be my area of expertise, having led the county's sexual assault unit for 6 years and helped form it. I'm proud to say that we opened the doors to victims who otherwise didn't have a voice. It starts before court ever happens. It starts with the police. It starts with the prosecutors. You have to have an open mind and give everybody dignity and assure them that we're partnered in this. I have yet to have a victim who told me that she regretted saying her name in court or that she regretted coming forth, even if it was a not guilty verdict. It was empowering and healing for them to be able to tell their story. And a judge should have patience and enforce respect in that courtroom, and I would absolutely do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison.
Delisha Coleman Morrison. I think it's very important to obviously abide by the Constitution, but also our laws. We have laws to protect all individuals, especially those that are victims. And well, as a judge, I would make sure that those laws are absolutely, aggressively enforced so that no one is embarrassed, no one is ashamed. Every victim that that comes forward has their day in court. And just as some of the other candidates stated, feel respect and know that they had an opportunity to get their story or their issue out and that it was addressed. I'm sorry. One of the things that is just vital to this issue is our community, making sure that we, as a community, engage each other to know that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this next question, we'll start with Mr. Cahalan. And that question is, please describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended people and explain how you handled it.
Recently, I took a controversial position on one of my cases that I had. I was handling for the law firm that I work with now. This woman was a victim of, she was being accused of negligence and wrongdoing, and she had not committed that act. Her insurance company was refusing to provide benefits to her and provide her a defense as she paid for, despite folks telling me that I should not continue representing this woman, and there were some issues surrounding her. I chose to ignore that, and I took on her case for free. We went to trial on the case, and I was able to get a no-cause verdict. She was not found liable for what she did not do, and I was able to help this woman out, and who was in dire circumstances.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
I once had a client who was convicted of several counts, 12 counts in fact, that were varied, but they all related to child pornography. And although my personal sensibilities were extremely offended by not only what he was accused of, but what he actually did, I very zealously advocated for him to have the least amount of incarceration. And I did that because it was my job. I was conflicted about it. It troubled me greatly, but I reminded myself that I took an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Michigan, all of which include zealously advocating for the accused. And I understand as well that when a defense attorney does that and when a judge ensures that that's done, that innocent person wrongly accused coming later has the full body of the laws to protect him or her.
Thank you. Ms. Hathaway.
As a part of my practice, I often defend companies in cases where my client isn't the only company as a defendant in the cases. There's a group of companies that have been sued, and all of them have to defend the case together as a part of a joint defense group. So regularly, I have to stand up for what my client wants to do, which is when it is not in agreement with what the joint defense group wants to do. And so I have to be prepared to argue our position articulately and explain to the joint defense group why we are not going to go with what their recommended course is.
Thank you. Ms. Samuels?
Over the years, there's been many instances when I had to do things that weren't popular, you know, prosecuting police on occasion, prosecuting religious figures, ministers, even professional athletes. It doesn't matter who the person is, what their station is in life. Right is right, and the law is the law, and nobody is above the law. It doesn't matter what your social background is, what your economic background is. People are people, and anyone is capable of committing a crime. That's not always popular. On the other hand, there's been times when I've had to dismiss some heinous crimes, some cases of criminal sexual conduct, or even homicide, because the evidence showed that there could not be a conviction. And that's hard to do, but you have to do the right thing. You have to go by what the evidence shows. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison?
To be honest, in regards to anger offense, quite frankly, being a criminal defense attorney angers and defends most people. Because it's like, well, how can you defend someone that you know is guilty? That is not my issue. My issue is not whether they're guilt or innocence, it's what can be shown under the law. Is there evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to find that individual guilty or innocent? And quite frankly, many of my cases are offensive just to the community. But that's what I've chosen to do, to make sure that these individuals are advocated for regardless. And if you've done the crime, know that the likelihood is you will be doing time. But at all times, know that you will be represented as I would want someone to represent me, equally and fairly and aggressively.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas.
Yes, one of the cases that I can recall, I was working as an assistant attorney general representing the Department of Human Services in child protection cases. It was a very sad circumstance. The mother and father were separated. There were 4 children, and the father shot all 4 of the children and set the house on fire while the mother was at work. 2 of the children survived the house fire. Only 1 actually survived the incident. The Department of Human Services filed to terminate both the mother and the father's parental rights in this particular case. Of course, the father's rights should have been terminated. I did not believe that it was appropriate to terminate the mother's parental rights based on the facts that we had before us, and I did not believe that it was in the child's best interest. So I worked very hard with the lawyer guardian ad litem on the case, and I went up the chain through the Department of Human Services in order to get a different result so that we could reunite that child with her mother.
Okay, thank you. This next question will first go to Ms. Green, and that question is, in the area of hate crimes, what are some of the issues in balancing free speech rights against the need to control offensive activity?
I'm sorry, what are some of the issues
In balancing free speech rights against the need to control offensive activity?
Well, one of the issues, obviously, is that where there is hate crime, the public is usually incensed. And so there is a situation that can develop on the street where there's a lot of disruption and disturbance. It's the responsibility of the police, especially when there is a media case, to ensure that there are enough police people on the street to ensure that there's no one hurt behind that incident. But I recall a number of years ago where there was a woman who stood in front of a Klansman because the Klansman was being attacked. And she understood the very basic principle of free speech. And our freedoms are not free. We have to sometimes give up some things in order to have them.
Thank you. Ms. Hathaway.
It's a difficult balance to strike between protecting the right to free speech and limiting speech that is offensive. But when it comes to hate crimes, for me, the balance easily strikes in favor of that's an area where we need to be able to regulate the speech in order to protect our communities.
Thank you.
We have great freedom of speech in this country, but what happens with hate crimes, and by the way, it's against the law, there are statutes on that, is the test is when it becomes assaultive. And there's usually some assaultive behavior attached to that language, where someone is intimidated in their home, coupled with that language. Someone is assaulted, coupled with that language. So it's pretty easy to determine what is a hate crime. Language can be assaultive, sometimes more hurtful than a physical assault. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delisha Coleman Morrison. It's a fine line in regards to free speech for hate crimes. And once that free speech crosses the line into an offensive activity, then it must be addressed. It must be addressed immediately, it must be addressed effectively, but also with understanding that we as a nation, as a society, want free speech. We want things to be spoken so that we can address them, so that we can make a determination of what is appropriate or acceptable for our communities. However, whenever it crosses that line, as Ms. Samuel said, and the law, where it causes actual injury, then we must address it effectively and efficiently and immediately.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. As it relates to free speech and hate crime, one of the things that I always like to think about, I think about our Constitution, and I think about the rights that we have under our Constitution. And while we have all of these rights, the government can step in and abridge those rights if there are public safety issues at stake. And so I think that it's important for us to recognize where free speech starts and where hate crime begins. And we have to do things under the law that are going to ensure the safety of all of our citizens. And so I do believe that we have to look at our Constitution. We also have to look at public safety, and we have to work and consider how we balance those two, free speech and protecting the public.
Okay, Mr. Cahalan.
Yes, I believe that more activities should be classified as hate crimes nowadays, especially in the society that we live in today, where it seems like our society is so divided and there's so much hate for one another out there. And while on the other hand, the First Amendment does allow individuals freedom of speech and the freedom to think what they want and say what they want. So I think it's a delicate balance between those who want their voices heard and whether it falls under the purview of a hate crime. And I think those need to be more clearly spelled out as far as what a hate crime is and what isn't. And if the individual is accused of that, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be given their due process and their day in court to defend themselves, as heinous as it may be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this will be our last question. And it will go to Ms. Hathaway, and that question is, if you observed a party in your courtroom being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective lawyer, how would you handle the situation?
Everyone has a right to competent counsel, so I would take the attorney back into my chambers and discuss with him or her why he was not representing his client effectively, and if he wasn't able to make the changes that were necessary, I would allow him to withdraw and allow the client to obtain new counsel.
Okay. Ms. Samuels?
Yes, that's a delicate issue because you cannot take one party back and talk to them alone without the other party being present while there is a pending case. But you can do it gingerly, you can do it with tact and professionally and raise those issues without berating someone, ridiculing them, and bringing up the issue. There are some remedies for that. You can allow them to withdraw. You can allow them to have co-counsel. You can allow them to come up to speed on something. So there are any number of ways to do it. But the judge, if the judge is the gatekeeper of the proceedings, so if the judge sees that, depending on the circumstance, they should step in and address it appropriately. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Morrison?
Thank you, Delisha Coleman Morrison. I would bring both the prosecution and the defense to the bench and address them at the bench that I feel or I see that the representation that is occurring in the courtroom is not appropriate, especially where defendants may have speak to the judge. I don't like that lawyer. He hasn't came and saw me but one time or no times. He hasn't given me my discovery. Come to the bench. What is the issue that you are not representing an individual how you would want to be represented? And give them an opportunity to withdraw, to get co-counsel, as Ms. Samuel stated, or to get an adjournment. They may have personal issues going on, but no one is going to be allowed to represent an individual inadequately before my court. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Yes, I think this is a very delicate situation. One of the things that I would do if I saw this would be that I would immediately address it. If it's, and you want to address it in a way that if there is a jury, you're not going to impact the way that the juror or the jury looks at the defense attorney and the representation that they're providing to the defendant. But this is definitely an issue that I would address outside of the hearing of the jury with both the prosecutor as well as the defense attorney present. If it's a court-appointed case, it's probably a little easier to appoint someone else. If the attorney continues to fail to provide adequate representation, it becomes a little more difficult where the attorney is one that is hired by the defendant, and the defendant doesn't necessarily see anything wrong with what is occurring in the courtroom. But in all instances, I would work to ensure that reversible error is not being created by the representation that the defendant is receiving in the courtroom.
Thank you. Mr. Cahalan.
If I observed a criminal defendant possibly being not adequately represented by counsel in my courtroom, I would excuse the jury if it was a jury trial and bring both attorneys up to the bench and in the most respectful manner decipher whether the defense attorney really is having an issue with his or her client, or there's a breakdown in communication, or what it is that the issue really is causing them to show difficulty in representing that individual, and assess whether it would be best to possibly have the attorney withdraw as counsel or seek an adjournment from the court so that the defense attorney and his client, his or her client, could meet and see what they want to do and properly file the paperwork necessary to substitute a new attorney in or seek different counsel from the legal aid and defender's office so that individual does not go without proper representation as they deserve.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
If I observed a party represented in an ineffective way, I would call both the counsel into chambers, and I would determine whether it's a matter of laziness, incompetence, or something else, because it's not always laziness. Sometimes it is incompetence. Sometimes a lawyer is doing his or her best, but his or her best is not enough. And if that's the case, then I would ensure that that person is associated with someone who can mentor that individual on a case. And if it's not a criminal case, which is often the case in family matters, people represent themselves, and that's the greatest instance where they're not receiving competent counsel. I would call a law school and see if one of the students at the law school would be willing for experience to practice under the student practice rule.
Okay, thank you. It's now time for the candidates to make a 2-minute closing statement. And as we will continue the staggered process, and we will begin with Ms. Samuels.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm asking humbly and respectfully for you to support me this fall. I am experienced in all of the questions that have been put to us. Experience matters. You need to have experience to even recognize whether there's incompetent counsel happening, and I have that experience. I believe that a judge does not put on that robe and sit up a little higher than other people because they're looking down on lesser beings. That's not the case. She is there to be the gatekeeper, to ensure that everybody gets a fair, respectful, equal opportunity to state their case. She's there to ensure that there is a courtroom atmosphere that allows people to freely litigate their case without being berated or ridiculed. We have a big problem with that. She is there to ensure that there is justice, but I will tell you, there is no substitute for experience. You are entrusting your most important matters to a judge. You're putting those most important matters into the hands of a judge, and it's not enough for a judge to know the law. She has to have common sense and life experience on her plate, a connection to the communities for which she serves, and an understanding of the people of those communities. It is not a one-size-fits-all. And I have that experience, and I care, and I have a proven track record. I'm asking you to allow me to serve as your next Wayne County Circuit Court judge, and I've worked every day for the last 20 years for that privilege to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison.
Thank you. Delisha Coleman Morrison. As stated, experience, integrity, and committed to the community. I've been practicing law over 22 years, and I've stated, as stated, in jury trials, and I'm running, and it's not popular because there are issues in that court. I see them every day, and it has to stop. Judges have to have the integrity to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to let that witness, whether you be a police officer or someone with great access or income, whoever you are, you're not going to get away with it. It's justice, not just us. We need to make sure that judges understand the impact of their decisions, not just sending someone away so that it's somebody else's problem, but addressing them, because at some point, our community needs to be restored. And if that individual has mental health, addiction, or income or education issues, sending them away is not going to provide what our community needs to make sure that they don't come back in just a revolving door. And that's what I bring, because in my 22 years, the people I've represented, my husband and I are mentors at a program called Midnight Golf, because we want to make sure we get to the youth before they get to me as a criminal defense attorney and as your next Wayne County Third Circuit Court judge. You need to know that when the community, when one person is taken out of the community, there's a hole. And we need to make sure that that hole is filled with people that can contribute to our society, our community. Delisha Coleman Morrison for Wayne County Third Circuit Court.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Good evening again. My name is Regina Thomas, and I am asking for the privilege to serve you as one of your next Wayne County Circuit Court judges. I have shared with you my education and my experience, but one of the things that I have not shared with you is my commitment and my passion for access to justice. And I have been guided by trying to figure out how I can improve our justice system. And one of the things that I've done over the years is that when I recognized that there was a need to improve how our state was meeting its constitutional burden to provide adequate representation for poor people in our state, I became a volunteer and then a board member for the Michigan Campaign for Justice. And the Campaign for Justice was a broad-based coalition that was brought together to try to pass legislation which would create a statewide indigent defense system that would be fully funded and will provide attorneys with the resources that they needed to adequately represent indigent defendants in our state. As a part of those volunteer efforts, I was chosen by the state of Michigan, the State Bar of Michigan, to travel to Washington, D.C. and testify before Congress regarding the state of our indigent defense system. I am proud to say that we were able to pass bipartisan legislation, and we did develop a Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, which is currently looking at standards and also looking at a way to fully fund our indigent defense system. But while there's a constitutional mandate in our state or in our country to provide representation in criminal matters, no such mandate exists when it comes to civil legal assistance. And so in my work, what I found out is that for every 21,000 people in our state that are eligible for free legal assistance, there's only one legal aid attorney. So I've worked zealously over the years to develop resources to assist those people who have to navigate our legal system on their own. I'm running because I understand the impact judges have on the everyday lives of people, and I understand that those same people will find themselves before the court, and they need to be treated with dignity and respect. So again, my name is Regina Thomas, and I hope for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you. Mr. Cahalan.
First of all, thank you all for coming tonight to this forum, this riveting, edge of your seat debate that we've had here tonight. I'm running for judge this year. I've told you about my background and my experience, and I'm running for judge this year because I believe now more than ever we need to elect the right judges to the bench. We need to, as we've seen, disposition and temperament and personality is crucial to serving as a judge. I believe it's something that you were either born for or you weren't. It's either you were called to do it or you weren't. I believe I was called to do it. I want to follow in a line of tradition in my family, on both sides of my family. I was taught at an early age that the only way to a truly happy life is to give it to serving other people, and the way to do so as an attorney, and the way to have the greatest impact is to be a judge. And I want to give my career to sitting on the bench, to serving the people of Wayne County, to serving you, to making an impact on all of your lives for the better, for our community. And I believe that I can do that. I believe I was called to do that, and that's all I've wanted to do for my whole life, and I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to take that on. I'm ready to be a fair, effective, impartial judge for all of you. And I think, as we've mentioned, a judge is in a unique position, different than other parts of the government, that we deal with. Judges deal with people on an individual basis. Each case is an individual. That's somebody's life that we're dealing with. That could be a great day for them. That could be a terrible day for them. But it's up to us to see them as an individual and give them their time in court. So I'm asking you for your support, for you to give me that chance to have that impact, and to vote John C. Cahalan for Third Circuit Judge on November 6th, a vote you can be truly proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
Thank you again for your attention. My name is Tracy Green, and I'm running for Third Circuit Court Judge. I don't ever want to assume that people know what the jurisdiction of the Third Circuit Court is, and by the questions that were posed here this evening, I get the impression that many believe that it's primarily felony matters, and as has already been alluded by Ms. Thomas, it's more than that. The jurisdiction of the court is civil matters for more than $25,000 in controversy, all felony matters, and all family court matters. And the family court includes domestic relations, which are divorce, child custody, child support, etc., the delinquency cases, and the child protection cases. I am a lifelong Detroiter, which means I'm a lifelong Wayne County resident. I attended Cass Technical High School. I obtained both of my degrees, my Bachelor's of Social Work degree and my law degrees from Wayne State University. So I'm committed to this Wayne County community. I believe that my posture and my judicial philosophy, which is predicated upon our common notions of fairness, which is simply fairness, dignity, and respect, is why you should vote for me. Because judges are qualified to sit and hear cases because they have practiced law for 5 years or more. I'm explaining to you that you need someone who will insist that the rule of law is upheld and is respected. And the way that that happens is that no matter the outcome of a case, everyone who leaves the courtroom believes that they've been treated fairly and that their dignity has been upheld. If that happens, they'll be more likely to abide by the rule of the court. And in this day and age where we're so disillusioned with our governmental institutions, we can't afford to lose confidence in our judiciary.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Ms. Hathaway.
Thank you again for having me this evening, and to all of you for coming. My experience practicing in Wayne County has taught me that when someone enters a courtroom, it is under very difficult circumstances, and they deserve to be treated fairly and respectfully, and to have their case decided without any undue delay or unnecessary expense. So if I am fortunate enough to be elected to the Wayne County Circuit Court, I will be a strong voice for efficiency, service, and fairness. I also believe in a very strong, independent, and nonpartisan judiciary. My courtroom will not cater to any special interest groups. Fair and equal justice for all will be my hallmark. I come from a family of public servants who instilled in me the importance of hard work, integrity, and serving others at a young age. My father has served on the Wayne County Circuit Court bench for the last 10 years. My mother was a nurse, and so is my older sister. My younger sister is a teacher, and both of my brothers-in-law are firefighters. So when we say we dedicate our lives to service in my family, we really mean it. And if I am fortunate enough to be elected, I would bring a passion for service with me to the bench bench. I hope on November 6th you will remember to turn over your ballot to the back on the nonpartisan section and cast your vote for Bridget Mary Hathaway for Third Circuit Court Judge.
Thank you. I would like to thank the candidates for their participation. We appreciate the commitment it takes to run for office. Before we close, I want to remind you that there are many other important races and proposals that will be on the ballot on November 6th. For further information, go to the League of Women Voters online voter guide at www.vote411.org. The polls will be open on Tuesday, November 6th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Absentee ballots are available from the city clerk's office. Please vote. Don't forget to vote, and take your patience with you. Go through the whole entire ballot, even the back. Thank you very much.